He won a majority of 80, but tomorrow that could be pulverised.
Then you know what to do, don't you, everybody? There's only one thing to do. Vote Conservative on Thursday, my friends. In the brief time that we have left, I hope that you will encourage everybody else in this country to do the same. Thank you very much. Thank you.
This was a very difficult in-person endorsement to secure. There was no joint appearance.
Well, first of all, I've got to thank Boris for being here. Thank him for his support. Isn't it great? Isn't it great to have our Conservative family united, my friends? Yeah!
Boris Johnson had left the room before Rishi Sunak's warm words about the predecessor he helped to topple.
I've been arguing that the last 14 years have been about chaos and division, and last night they wheeled out the architect of chaos and division. So I think that just shows the sort of desperate negative place they've got to in their campaign.
Keir Starmer wants a high turnout tomorrow to help him to win seats never before on Labour's radar.
I'm feeling very pleased and confident. We've worked for 4.5 years to change the Labour Party, to put it to be a party that says country first, party second, with a clear and programme and plan to change our country for the better. I want to now get on with the opportunity to roll up my sleeves and bring about the change which I think the country deserves.
Last-minute Tory online advertising was trying to hit any button that would tap into voter doubts and fears to get some sort of late swing, save some seats from falling.
Tomorrow's vote is an important one for the country. I know lots of people haven't made up their mind, so I just ask people, look, I get frustrations with the past, but think about what a Labour government would mean for your family. Can you afford to pay thousands of pounds of higher taxes? Do you want to pay tax on your pension for the first time? If the answer to those things is no, then vote Conservative.
Hello. Rishi.
Good afternoon. Hello.
How are you? Hi, I'm fine. You?
Rishi Sunak went knocking on the doors of detached houses in Hampshire. He wouldn't repeat the words of his Cabinet Minister Mel Stride, who confidently predicted a Labour mega majority, but the Prime Minister's presence in affluent Hampshire, a far cry from Hartlepool and the Red Wall, spoke for itself. When Rishi Sunak had finished rolling plasticine at this rural primary school, a genteel mob waited outside.
See you, Rishi.
Rishi Sunak's hope that don't knows will swing towards him at the last minute isn't being detected by pollsters. Exactly the attack on the capital.
Every bit helps.
So how do the last polls of the campaign suggest the House of Commons from the 2019 election will change? In a poll exclusively for Channel 4 News, JL Partners' last survey of the election suggests Labour could win 442 seats. The Tories, 111. The Lib Dems, 58. This poll projects the SNP plummeting to 15 seats. Others tally up to 23, and Reform win only 1 seat on this projection, having drifted down to 16% of the vote from an earlier peak. These numbers would give Labour a majority of 234. Not hard to imagine what his reaction would be if that were to happen, chorusing the old Lib Dem call for electoral reform, just as they appear to have made headway playing the first past the post game.
I'm enjoying driving this wonderful yellow tractor, and we're going to knock down those blue walls.
Now focusing on winning seats, not national share of the vote, and on bold, relentless visuals like no one before.
Well, joining me now is Labour's Nick Thomas-Symonds, who's currently the Shadow Minister without portfolio. Well, the senior Tories are all but conceding defeat. This election's in the bag for you, isn't it?
It certainly isn't in the bag, and good to join you this evening, Cathy. By the way, this election will be decided tomorrow by the votes of millions of people. And frankly, the Conservatives are in a desperate situation, going out there essentially trying to suppress the vote, trying to make outlandish claims as they are. What this is about now is whether we can actually have that change. I've been knocking doors here in Torfaen and all around the country, and there is a real mood of time for a change, but it can only happen if people do come out and vote Labour tomorrow, and we will be fighting for every single vote right up until the close of poll at 10 p.m. tomorrow.
Are you nervous then?
We are confident, but we are most certainly not complacent. This general election, we've been campaigning not just over the past 6 weeks, but we have been working as part of Keir Starmer's team, changing the Labour Party over the past 4 years. I'm very proud to be part of this Change Labour Party, putting this offer before the British people at this election. But we never take people for granted, and that is why we will continue to make the arguments. We will continue to work on the doorsteps right throughout the rest of today and for all of tomorrow as well.
Well, our poll does suggest a majority of 234, which is way higher than the Blair landslide in 1997. And that change felt pretty seismic. You keep on mentioning the word, it's your one-word slogan. How radical a change are we looking at?
Well, look, we are going before the electorate tomorrow as a changed Labour Party. We have campaigned as a changed Labour Party. If we are privileged enough to govern, we will govern as a changed Labour Party.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the party, I'm talking about how will you change the country?
We believe the country does need fundamental change, and that is why we have set out our 6 first steps before the country. We need, firstly, that rock of economic stability, which the Conservatives have not provided. 5 Prime Ministers, 7 Chancellors of the Exchequer, 9 Education Secretaries, and people up and down the country still paying the price of that. We want to switch on GB energy so that we can deliver energy security for people, so they're not left exposed again as they were when Putin invaded Ukraine illegally 2 years ago, but also deliver the jobs of the future. We also want to tackle antisocial behaviour. We want to deliver a border security command to deal with the issue of small boats crossing the English Channel. And we want to invest in health and in education. And we put forward a manifesto that is fully costed and fully funded to do those things.
All those policies that you've just name-checked, you know, we're familiar with from the campaign, but you talk about fundamental change. Are we looking at, is this going to be a radical government?
This is going to be a government that does deliver radical change. And do you know why? It's because that is what is being demanded on the doorsteps up and down the country. I've been speaking to people saying, do you feel better off after 14 years of Conservative government? And the resounding answer is no. You ask if people can name a public service in a better condition now than it was 14 years ago. People say no. And people say to you, things just don't work in this country anymore. So we understand the scale of the change that's required, but we are also being honest with the British people about the awful economic inheritance that we are going to have if we are privileged to form a government. But if people do come out and support us tomorrow, the work of change can begin on Friday. If the Conservatives are re-elected, there'll be no change at all.
Let's test your honesty then on the economy, because you've talked about growth and how much growth you need to fund the services that you want. So here's a radical idea. Rejoining the customs union or the single market. You're in charge, you are, with restoring trust with the EU. Is that a radical idea that you might consider at some point in the future? I know you've ruled it out for now.
No. No. We will not be rejoining the single market. We will not be rejoining the customs union. We will not be going back to freedom of movement. We don't think it's in the interest of the country to reopen the divisions of the past, and we will not do that. But what we have set out in our manifesto is a plan for where we can work together with European partners that is in our mutual interest. I've spoken already about Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine. That's why a security pact would be so important between the UK and our European neighbours. It's why, by the way, law enforcement cooperation is really important, so we can work together to bust the model of the criminal people smuggler gangs on these long routes across Europe. And it's important on trade as well, to deliver a veterinary agreement so we can put food and drink on tables here in the UK more cheaply than they otherwise would be put
yes
there.
or no, rejoining the EU in your lifetime? Yes or no?
I don't see that. I don't see that happening. And I think that what we have to focus on now is improving that relationship for the benefit of people here in the UK.
Nick Thomas-Symonds, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, the potential outcome of the election is a lot less clear in Scotland. In the last election, the SNP won 49 of the 59 Westminster seats. Boundary changes mean there are 57 up for grabs this year, and 2 leaders later, the SNP are in a close battle with Labour, with polls varying over who's ahead. Our Scotland correspondent, Catherine Sampson, is live for us in Edinburgh tonight. Catherine.
Yes, campaigning here in Scotland going on right up until the last minute. There is sunshine here in Leith this evening as we wait for John Swinney to arrive to make his final stump speech at this rally of supporters. Now, of course, the SNP in Scotland are battling Labour, who feel they will be resurgent in a number of key seats across Edinburgh, Glasgow and the Central Belt. So many seats in Scotland are marginal. They can turn on just a few hundred votes. Election night in Scotland will be anything but predictable.
This has got to be better than shaking hands and kissing babies, isn't it?
Well, his day started at Scottish Power. John Swinney looking to energise undecided voters in the final throes of a campaign he was thrown into just weeks after taking charge.
I would say to people in Scotland that they've got a simple choice. The election's over and done with, south of the border. The Tories are already conceding the election. So in Scotland, we've got a close contest between the Labour Party and the SNP, and voters have got a simple choice between Labour MPs who will do what they're told by Keir Starmer, who will vote for spending cuts, and SNP MPs who will put Scotland's interests first, who will campaign against spending cuts and make sure Scotland's got a future that's made in Scotland for Scotland.
Battling in buses which usually belong to rival Glasgow football teams, the fight is tight here between Labour and the SNP. Keir Starmer, who's visited Scotland several times during this campaign, dropped into a basketball centre in East Kilbride for one final push. How many seats would you consider a slam dunk for Labour tomorrow? Would winning anything less than a majority feel like a missed opportunity?
Anas in Scotland and me across the UK working together in lockstep have changed this Labour Party. And so this is not a numbers game, it's about the kind of government that's on offer. Turning our backs on chaos, division and the failure of the last 14 years and ushering in a government of service to serve and deliver in Scotland. Thank you.
In parts of rural Scotland, the Scottish Conservatives are competing with the SNP. Douglas Ross, who announced mid-campaign he'd quit as leader after the election, making the case.
Throughout the last 6 weeks of this campaign, we've been getting out, knocking on doors, speaking to people and urging them to unite behind the Scottish Conservatives so we can beat the SNP and send them the message that they need to forget about independence and focus on the issues that really matter to people.
For an election where a lot could change in Scotland, campaign highlights have been few.
You can't answer the door right now, but if you'd like to leave a message, you can do it now.
Theresa May went through the keyhole.
My name is Theresa May.
Labour channelled Taylor Swift.
Eat your heart out!
The Scottish Lib Dems tried their best to keep up with Ed Davies' approach to campaigning.
You've always needed your ID to go on holiday.
And the SNP's Stephen Flynn hit the beach.
Don't let the Tories steal your vote this Thursday.
It's the school summer holidays in most parts of Scotland, and delays have resulted in some being left without postal votes as they head abroad for trips. With the fight so tight in dozens of marginal seats, turnout tomorrow could be key to the colours of Scotland's new election map.
That's the picture in Scotland. On to Wales. As you saw earlier in the programme, Keir Starmer began his day in south-west Wales, warning there are lots of undecided voters out there still to be convinced. Labour looks set to cement its grip on Wales, though. One poll this week showing the Conservatives heading for a record low, neck and neck with Reform UK. Our correspondent Andy Davis is in Cardiff for us tonight. Andy.
The story of the last general election in Wales was a great one for the Tories. They won 14 seats, matching their best performance ever. What a different picture it looks like now if those polls are to be believed, because some are now questioning whether the Tories can win any seats in Wales. Labour certainly were in a buoyant mood this morning in West Wales. Sir Keir Starmer was there side by side with the Labour leader in Wales and First Minister Vaughan Gething. And that key message of change from Labour, of course, is somewhat blurred here in Wales, given that there is already a Labour government here, headed up by a First Minister, incidentally, who lost a vote of confidence in the Senedd recently, and Keir Starmer was asked about that again today. So that's an additional factor at play here and one to watch. The message from Labour to voters in Wales has been, imagine what could happen with two Labour governments either side of the Severn Bridge. For their opponents, and particularly the Conservatives, it is precisely that Labour record in Wales, especially on health and education, which has been weaponised routinely against Keir Starmer.
And Andy, how about Plaid Cymru then?
Well, their leader, Rhun ap Iorwerth, was in one of his target seats today, campaigning, reinforcing their message that Plaid can be a real voice for Wales in the next Parliament. Given the boundary changes, if they were to win 4 seats again, that would be a good night for them. The Lib Dems want to get one Welsh MP back in Parliament. That would be a good result for them. And then there's Reform. They're polling really well in Wales at the moment, and what they do here tomorrow night is going to be watched really closely in the context of what implications that might have for elections to the Welsh Parliament here in 2 years' time. One issue which has been featuring throughout all the campaigns over the last 6 weeks has been that of trust and integrity in politics. And there was a really interesting development in the Parliament here last night when, following an initiative by the former Plaid Cymru leader Adam Price, the Welsh Government announced that it was going to introduce a law which would ban politicians from the Senedd who have been found to deliberately lie. And I asked the Labour leader this morning, if he were to become Prime Minister, would he commit to looking at something similar for MPs in Westminster?
I'll be absolutely clear. I think we need to improve our standards in public life in Westminster, and returning politics to service rather than self-entitlement is a really important change that's on the ballot tomorrow.
Can I pin you down on this particular initiative? Would you consider something similar for Westminster?
Well, we are already committed to reviewing standards and putting in place stronger provisions. I'm not going to go into individual clauses at this stage.
But his focus right now, he went on to say, was getting through to 10 o'clock tomorrow night. Back to you in Leeds.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks very much for that. Now, as we've been hearing, the reason some Conservatives are sounding so downbeat about election night is this. The polls, Labour on 40% as of yesterday, the Conservatives on just 22% in this average of recent polls from the website Politico. There has been a slight narrowing in the last few days, but this is an eye-opening lead for the eve of a general election. What about seats? Well, super polls try and work this all out seat by seat, and our analysis of more than a dozen of these super polls show they all predict a Labour majority ranging from 114 to 382 seats. The average Labour majority in these super polls is predicted at 258 seats. Far, far bigger than Labour's 1997 landslide majority. So let's focus on election night and what to look out for. Between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m, some key battlegrounds should start to come in. How Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch fares in Essex North West will be a sign of how the Conservatives' night is going. We'll also see if Labour can retake Rochdale, lost in a by-election just 4 months ago to George Galloway. Then between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m, lots of eyes on senior Conservatives. Will Jeremy Hunt in Godalming and Ash become the first sitting Chancellor ever to lose his seat in a general election? Scotland. Will the SNP win Scotland? Glasgow's 6 seats will be telling. Labour targeting them all, including the SNP's David Linden in Glasgow East. And look out for these subplots. Will former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, now standing as an independent, be re-elected in Islington North? Will Green co-leader Carla Denyer unseat Labour's Thangnam Debonair in Bristol Central, a key Green target, that one? And showdown in East Belfast. Will the MP be DUP leader Gavin Robinson or Alliance leader Naomi Long? 4 to 5 a.m. then, big moment potentially. Will Nigel Farage take Clacton from the Conservatives for reform? And how many seats will the Conservatives hang on to in Wales, where Welsh Secretary David T.C. Davis is under threat from Labour in Monmouthshire? Between 5 and 7 a.m, well, by now it should be clear if the polls were right. An interesting time for former Prime Minister Liz Truss to pop up and find out if she has held Norfolk South West as the country emerges bleary-eyed to learn if it has indeed been an historic night. And for a full list of candidates in all these seats, visit channel4.com/news. Kathy.
Well, Channel 4 has examined the use of AI to create fake content with the aim of swaying how people vote. And now Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says he's been targeted.
I really can't talk now. So
Just one question real quick.
I really have got
Why didn't it take...
A fake audio clip was posted online claiming he used very strong language while arguing with a protester about a ceasefire in Gaza. Mr. Streeting has responded, calling the clip obviously fake audio and the latest dirty tactic to be deployed against him. Kieran.
Thanks, Kathy. Well, Daisy Cooper is Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, and she joins us now on the eve of the election from St Albans in Hertfordshire. Daisy Cooper, are you just as happy if people are not voting for the Lib Dems as such, but against the Conservatives?
Well, what we're seeing in this general election from the doorstep conversations that we're having right across the country is that millions of people are saying that they are going to vote positively for us because they've seen our vision for saving the NHS and social care, taking real action on the cost of living and also tackling the raw sewage scandal. So many people are going to vote positively for us. But of course, in first past the post, for as long as we have that system, there will always be people who want to vote tactically. And of course, when they want to vote tactically in areas where the Liberal Democrats are the key challengers, of course, we'll welcome their votes too.
Well, yeah, according to YouGov, 4 in 10 Lib Dem voters are voting tactically, and 1 in 5 Lib Dem voters wish they were voting for Labour.
Well, I think if you ask people right across the country, you find that people vote tactically for all sorts of different parties in different parts of the country. And that's because of the voting system that we have. But quite frankly, we do have first past the post and we have to play within those rules. And for as long as we do, Liberal Democrats are targeting those seats where we are the key challengers to the Conservatives, and we're attracting voters based on our pledge to save the NHS, take real action on the cost of living and tackle the raw sewage scandal.
Right, and might be going into the upside down a little bit in this election, where the Lib Dems do rather well out of the existing electoral system, despite calling for change all these years. Because you're polling behind reform, aren't you? And yet you're set to win way more seats than them. If you look at the Channel 4 News poll tonight, Lib Dems on 12, Reform on 16% of the vote, but Reform would get 1 seat, you'd get 58.
Well, look, as I say, we don't like this particular voting system. We've been long-standing supporters of introducing a fairer voting system, some form of proportional representation. But for as long as we have first past the post, we have to play within those rules. And so whatever the polls say, what you can say is that in real elections, in the last Parliament, Liberal Democrats were winning and Liberal Democrats were beating Conservatives in places like True Blue Buckinghamshire, True Blue Shropshire, Devon, Somerset as well. And in this election, right across the Blue Wall in the southwest, where Liberal Democrats are the key challengers, we're really hopeful that we can channel our resources and beat lots of Conservative MPs tomorrow.
Yeah, but just for the record, you don't think it would be fair if Reform got a higher share of the vote than you, and yet you got way more seats than them?
Of course we don't think it's fair. We've always maintained that the current voting system is deeply unfair. We've always wanted there to be a fairer voting system, but we have to play within the rules that are there.
Can you see yourself working with Reform UK after the election to push for a change to the electoral system?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the fact is that I don't share any values with Nigel Farage and his party.
This one you do.
But we will continue to make the case.
Do they not want to change to the voting system as well?
We will continue to make the case for proportional representation. If Nigel Farage or the Reform Party want to make the case as well, that's up to them. But we will continue to make the positive case for having a fairer voting system.
If there is a Labour government, and people might look to the things that Lib Dems will oppose Labour on. And we've just heard on the programme tonight Nick Thomas-Symonds, a shadow cabinet minister, say no, really, to rejoining the EU in his lifetime. What do you make of that?
Well, it's the night before the general election and millions of people are going to cast their votes tomorrow. Some of them may still be undecided as to how they want to vote. And all I can say to them is that we Liberal Democrats are standing on our own platform and our own policies and our own manifesto. And in our manifesto, we have set out a roadmap for putting the UK back at the heart of Europe again.
I see. And another area of difference is VAT on private schools, isn't it? Labour are proposing VAT on private schools to raise £1.5 billion, and you oppose that. Why is that?
Well, as a point of principle, Liberal Democrats believe that you shouldn't charge VAT on education. We've got very ambitious plans for our schools in England and across the UK. What we're saying is we want there to be free school meals for children. We want to increase funding per child, per head in schools. We want to sort out the crisis that has engulfed special educational needs. So we have a very ambitious plan of our own for improving our schools right around the country.
OK, Daisy Cooper, thanks so much for speaking with us. Kathy, back to you.
Thanks, Kieran.
Thank you.
Well, we can now speak to Sir Mark Spencer, who's the Minister for Food, Farming and Fisheries. Sir Mark, are you throwing in the towel like some of your colleagues?
Sorry, so it wasn't very clear, that question.
I wondered if you were throwing in the towel like some of your colleagues seem to be. Conceding defeat?
No, not at all. It's all up for grabs still. You know, there's still time to influence people's views and people's vote tomorrow. And I hear these polls, but I think what really matters is the poll tomorrow, the general election tomorrow. And I think when people will see those predictions of a huge Labour majority, that means that Labour will be free to put up our taxes, to change the immigration system, to make it an open-door immigration system. Speculation today about inheritance tax changes that they may introduce, council tax going up. I think there's still time for people to reflect on that and whether they want to deliver Keir Starmer a huge majority that could see them change the voting system. So we've got votes for 16-year-olds as well as votes for prisoners.
You're running through a load of speculation, most of which the Labour Party has scotched. But let me just put to you what your own colleagues have said. Mel Stride talks about Labour are going to get a kind of supermajority. Suella Braverman says the election is over. Why should your poor old activists knock on another door?
No, I think that's the point, that these are predictions. They are the polling predictions. And I think what Mel was saying certainly was we could wake up on Friday morning with that reality, but it's still not too late to change that reality. It's still not too late to stop those tax increases that the Labour government will bring in. It's still not too late to make sure we get a strong immigration system by voting Conservative. And for those people that are thinking about voting Reform or voting for another party, they need to think about the reality of what they're going to deliver if those polls are true.
Suella Braverman was talking about the reality you've delivered, and I quote, she said, "We failed to cut immigration or tax or deal with the net zero and woke policies we have presided over for 14 years. Do you feel a bit sorry for Rishi Sunak that he's got people taking pot shots at him throughout this campaign?
So I think certainly we should be concentrating on what the electorate want. We should be concentrating on our own campaigns in our own seats and making sure we communicate those messages. Because the danger of that sort of speculation and that sort of comment is that we will deliver exactly what we don't want to deliver, which is a huge Labour majority with all of those powers to keep putting up our tax, change our relationship with the EU, allow open-door immigration, all of the things that we want to prevent from happening. And the danger is that that's what we're going to deliver.
OK, well, Labour, for a start, says immigration is too high. So, I mean, that's one, just to pick you up on one point there. But, I mean, you're trying to sort of boost morale for the troops, aren't you, by wheeling out Boris Johnson last night at the rally. Do you think he's a vote winner in the country after the lies he told over Partygate?
Well, I mean, so clearly Boris was a proven vote winner in 2019, but he's a proven
liar as well, though, wasn't he?
All Conservatives that all Conservatives want to join together in sending a strong message that a Conservative government would be better than a huge Labour majority government, which will be free to continue to put up taxes and to change our immigration system.
Right, I mean, Nadine Dorries, Boris Johnson's old friend, says that he would have beaten Keir Starmer easily. Do you think she's got a point?
Well, I mean, you know, I think we've got to, whilst it'd be nice to speculate on what might have happened or will happen, we've got to stick to the reality of tomorrow is polling day. It's not too late for people to cast their vote for Conservative candidates and to stop all of those challenges, which I'm saying to you will be inevitable from a huge Labour majority, with changes to inheritance tax, increases in taxation across the board, over £2,000 per household.
Yeah, that's been denied. You keep on trundling out these. You're talking about speculation. I mean, that's all speculation that has been scotched by Labour. The taxation, for example.
That's actually not true. Actually,
no. What's not true is you talking about £2,000 tax rise.
Those £2,000 tax rises have been independently verified. Actually, some of them include Labour figures. So where Labour have said it will cost between 30 million and 50 million, we've taken the lower figure. So that's actually an underestimate.
You know that has been
from the Labour Party.
You know that has been scotched across the board. The civil service had to intervene to take you up on that. But let's move on. Final question.
That's actually not true.
No, what's not true is you warning about a £2,000 tax rise. But look, what I want to ask you, final question.
That is absolutely true.
What, as true as the fact that you've presided over a tax burden that's the highest in 70 years for a start. That is true, isn't it? As Suella Braverman herself said.
We've cut taxes for working people. We'll do that again. We've cut national insurance contributions for working people. But of course, we do need to recognise that the tax burden is too high. But what I would say to you is, in the DNA of the Conservative Party, we want to cut tax. In the DNA of the Labour Party, they like to tax and spend. And I think that's what inevitably will happen if those polls, as you talked about at the beginning of this interview, come to pass. It's not too late to change that reality.
Right.
Tomorrow you get the opportunity to cast your vote.
Sir Mark Spencer.
And say vote Conservative.
Thank you very much, Sir Mark Spencer.